I was standing in my parents' living room on Christmas morning when I realized that being the dependable son had turned me invisible. I didn't know it yet, but in about 15 minutes, I'd be walking out that door for the last time as the person I'd always been. My name is Stephen Martinez. I'm 28, and I've been a freelance photographer for 6 years. Not the kind that gets magazine spreads or gallery shows, the kind that shoots weddings on Saturdays and edits real estate photos on Tuesday nights to make rent. The kind who says yes when family needs help because that's what you do. That's what I thought you did, anyway. The tree was massive that morning, covered in ornaments my mother had bought during a shopping spree I'd helped fund 3 months earlier. She'd called me in September, voice tight with stress, saying they were a little short on the credit card bill. I'd sent $2,000 without asking questions. I never asked questions. That was my role, silent support, invisible scaffolding holding up everyone else's comfort. Thomas walked in 20 minutes late, with his girlfriend Jennifer, both of them laughing at something on his phone. My mother lit up like he'd just returned from war instead of his apartment 15 minutes across town. She hugged him so hard you'd think she hadn't seen him in years. My father stood to shake his hand, asking about his latest photography project with genuine interest I'd stopped hoping for when I was 16. I sat in the armchair by the window, the one nobody else wanted because it was too far from the action. That's where I always sat, where I'd sat for years, watching from the edges, while they circled around Thomas like he was the sun and they were planets locked in his orbit. There was a massive silver box under the tree with Thomas's name on it, wrapped in expensive paper with a red bow the size of my head. My gift was shoved behind the tree skirt, wrapped in leftover birthday paper from someone else's party. I remember staring at that contrast and feeling something cold settle in my chest, but I pushed it down. I'd gotten good at pushing things down. My mother started distributing gifts with theatrical flair, and Thomas opened his first, a professional camera bag worth $400. I knew because I'd been eyeing the same bag for 2 years, saving slowly, never quite getting there. Then came a tripod, then a lighting kit, then lens filters, each one a piece of equipment I'd dreamed about owning, casually handed to my brother, who'd only been taking photography seriously for 3 years. 3 years compared to my 16. I watched my parents' faces as he opened each gift. The pride there was so pure, it felt like a physical thing, something I could reach out and touch, but never hold. They'd never looked at me that way. Not when I won a regional photography contest at 17, not when I got my first paid client. Not ever. Then my father stood up and lifted the massive silver box. He placed it in front of Thomas with exaggerated mystery, and my mother actually clapped. Inside was a Canon camera body worth $4,000. I'd been saving for that exact model for 3 years. I had $2,300 set aside, hidden in a separate account I barely touched, because every time I got close, someone needed something. Dad's surgery, Mom's furnace, Thomas's car insurance after he'd crashed sophomore year. My brother lifted that camera out of the box, and I watched my parents transform with pride so intense I felt dizzy. Then my mother pulled an envelope from her pocket and told him to open it. Plane tickets. 2 of them. Paris. A 10-day photography workshop with an internationally recognized photographer. All expenses paid. I'd applied for a scholarship to that same workshop 2 years ago and been rejected. I'd never told anyone because what was the point? They wouldn't have cared. Thomas formed this tight circle of joy with my parents and Jennifer, all of them hugging and talking over each other about how this would change his career. His 3-year-old career built on opportunities they'd funded while I scraped by alone. Jennifer looked at the tickets like they were magic. My father clapped Thomas on the back and said, "You deserve this, son. You're so talented. We believe in you." Words I'd never heard, not once in 28 years. Then my mother turned to me, almost as an afterthought. and said I had something too. She handed me my box, light as air, and I opened it slowly because some stupid part of me was still hoping, still believing that maybe they'd balanced things somehow, that my gift would at least acknowledge I existed beyond my bank account. Inside was a sweater, used, faded gray wool with a stretched collar and pilling on the sleeves. I recognized it immediately. It used to hang in my father's closet 3 years ago, before he'd declared it too worn out to donate. Beneath it was a note card in my mother's handwriting. You don't need much anyway. Love, Mom, and Dad. The room went completely silent. Even Thomas looked uncomfortable for a second before turning back to his camera. I stared at those 6 words until they blurred. You don't need much anyway. Translation: You don't matter much anyway. You're not worth the effort. You're just Stephen. Jennifer whispered something to Thomas. In her eyes I saw pity, and that was somehow worse than cruelty. My mother asked brightly what I thought, her voice stretched thin with false cheer. I folded the sweater carefully, placed it back in the box, and said it was perfect. Because what else could I say? Making a scene would mean I was ungrateful, difficult, the problem child who couldn't just be happy for his brother. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and left without saying goodbye. Nobody called after me. My apartment was dark and cold when I got home. I'd been meaning to turn up the heat for weeks, but kept putting it off to save money. Money I'd been sending to them instead. I dropped the box on my kitchen counter and stared at it for a long time. Then I did something I'd never let myself do before. I calculated. I opened my laptop and started listing every dollar I'd given them over the past 6 years. Every wire transfer, every bill I'd paid, every emergency that somehow became my responsibility. Dad's heart surgery 3 years ago, $8,000. Mom's furnace installation, $3,200. Thomas's car insurance deductible, $2,400. The new roof, the property taxes when they'd overspent on renovations, the vet bills, the wedding gift for my cousin they'd asked me to cover because they were a bit short this month. It took 2 hours to reconstruct everything, combing through bank statements and emails, remembering late-night phone calls and guilt-laden conversations. The total came to $47,300. I stared at that number until my vision blurred. Nearly $50,000. More than my entire annual income last year, more than my car was worth, more than I'd ever spent on myself in my entire adult life. And they'd given me a used sweater. I pushed away from the laptop and walked to my window. Outside, the city was decorated for Christmas, lights twinkling on every building, families visible through windows laughing and celebrating. Normal families where children weren't ranked by entertainment value, where gifts reflected actual affection instead of casual dismissal. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Thanks for coming today. Drive safe. Generic and distant. The kind of message you send to an acquaintance. Not your son. Not the son who'd kept them financially afloat for 6 years while they poured everything into your other son's dreams. I went back to the kitchen and pulled out the sweater, holding it up to the light. It smelled faintly of mothballs and my father's cologne. They'd literally re-gifted me my father's discarded clothing and acted like they'd done me a favor. That note sat at the bottom of the box, those 6 words staring up at me like an accusation. You don't need much anyway. Maybe they were right. Maybe I didn't need much. Maybe I didn't need them. The thought appeared fully formed, clean and sharp as a blade. It should have felt wrong or disloyal, but instead, it felt like relief. I thought about Thomas's face when he'd opened that camera, how my father had explained every feature with genuine interest, how my mother had clapped when he'd opened the Paris tickets. I thought about every birthday they'd forgotten, every milestone they'd missed, every time they'd called, asking for money but never called asking how I was doing. Then I thought about something else. I needed to check one thing, just one thing, because something about today felt calculated in a way that seemed impossible even for them. I needed to see their trash. I waited until midnight to drive back. Their lights were off, both cars in the garage. They were always asleep by 11, creatures of comfortable habit built on my financial foundation. Their garbage cans sat at the end of the driveway, waiting for morning pickup. I'd taken out their trash 100 times over the years, usually without being asked. Just another invisible service I provided. I lifted the lid of the recycling bin and turned on my phone's flashlight, scanning through Christmas wrapping paper and boxes from Thomas's gifts. There, wedged between two wine bottles, was a receipt from the camera store downtown. I pulled it out carefully and unfolded it under the streetlight. Canon camera body, $3,910. Professional camera bag, $379. Tripod system, $289. LED light kit, $199. Lens filter set, $124. Subtotal, $4. I photographed the receipt. Every line, every number, the date, everything. Then I carefully folded it, put it in my jacket pocket, placed the lid back exactly as it had been, and drove home in complete silence. Back in my apartment, I turned on every light, made coffee I didn't plan to drink, and sat at my kitchen table with the receipt in front of me. Two photographs sat side by side on my phone screen. The receipt showing $8,486 spent on Thomas, and my used sweater with its cruel little note. The visual was perfect, devastating, undeniable. I thought about posting it immediately, but something stopped me. Not mercy or family loyalty, just timing. It was 1 in the morning. Most people were asleep. The impact would be minimal, lost in the late-night scroll. I needed morning. I needed coffee drinking, waiting for work to start morning when people checked their phones obsessively and shared things with everyone they knew. I needed maximum visibility. I saved both photos to a folder and set my alarm for 6. Then I let myself feel everything I'd been holding back since I'd opened that box. The anger came first, then grief, then something colder and clearer than both. Resolution. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my table drinking cold coffee, staring at those two photographs, and planning the next morning with the precision I brought to every photo shoot I'd ever done. Lighting, composition, timing, impact. They'd taught me to be invisible. Tomorrow I'd teach them what visibility actually meant. At exactly 6:47 in the morning, I posted both photographs to every social media platform I had. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even LinkedIn. Because why not let everyone see the professional version of family dysfunction? I kept the caption simple. One sentence. The cost of being unappreciated. No explanation, no context, just two photos side by side and 6 words that said everything. Then I tagged them. My mother, my father, Thomas, every family member who'd witnessed years of dismissal and said nothing. Every friend who'd made excuses for them. I made it public, shareable, impossible to ignore. Then I put my phone face down on the table and made breakfast. The first notification came at 6:52. A like, then another, then a share. By 7, the vibrations were constant, like a swarm of angry bees. I flipped it over at 7:15. 47 notifications. 63. 91. The numbers climbed faster than I could refresh. Comments poured in from friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Former coworkers, acquaintances, strangers who'd been tagged by people who'd been tagged by other people. This is heartbreaking. Your family should be ashamed. That's abuse. Some people shared their own stories, gifts they'd received that proved they didn't matter. Siblings who got everything while they got nothing. Parents who'd never seen them as equal. My post was spreading like wildfire, jumping from profile to profile, group to group. Someone shared it in a family dysfunction forum. Someone else posted it to Reddit. By 7:45, it was trending on Twitter in our city. At 8:03, my mother called. I didn't answer. She called again at 8:05, then 8:07, then 8:08. A text came through. Stephen, take that post down right now. This is private family business. Private? There was nothing private about humiliating your son with a used sweater while spending thousands on his brother. There was nothing private about decades of favoritism and dismissal. My father texted next. "This is extremely disrespectful. We raised you better than this." I stared at those words for a long moment, as if respect was something they'd actually taught me, as if their version of raising me hadn't been a masterclass in invisibility and exploitation. I typed back, "You raised me to be quiet. I'm done being quiet." The family group chat exploded. 17 messages in 3 minutes. Aunt Teresa asking what was going on. Uncle Alexander saying he'd just seen my post. Cousin Sandra saying, "Oh my God." Grandma Carol asking someone to explain. My mother tried to control the narrative. "Stephen is upset about a misunderstanding. Please ignore his post." A misunderstanding? She was calling my lived experience a misunderstanding. Thomas chimed in, "Dude, this is messed up. Take it down." I responded publicly where everyone could see, a used sweater and a note saying, "I don't need much, while you got $8,500 worth of camera equipment and a Paris trip." What exactly did I misunderstand? The chat went silent. By 9, my post had 847 shares. By 10, it had 2,300 shares, and local bloggers were asking to interview me. Someone had made a TikTok about it. Someone else had written a Twitter thread, analyzing the receipt line by line. My phone showed 83 missed calls, most from family, 3 from former friends asking if I was okay, 1 from a journalist at the local newspaper. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I made a second post at 10:23, just text this time, for everyone asking, "Yes, this is real. Yes, I've given my family $47,300 over 6 years to help with emergencies while I barely scrape by. Yes, the receipt is genuine. Yes, I'm done." I included a screenshot of my spreadsheet showing every transaction, every dollar, every date. That post got 1,200 shares in the first hour. By noon, everyone they knew had seen it. Everyone they worked with, everyone they went to church with, everyone in their book club and golf league and neighborhood association. The family group chat was on fire, and I was the one holding the match. They showed up at my apartment at 2 in the afternoon, all 3 of them. I watched them through my window before answering the door. My mother's face was blotchy from crying. My father looked furious. Thomas looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight like he wanted to be anywhere else. I let them knock 3 times before opening the door. I didn't invite them in. "Take it down," my father said immediately. No greeting, no apology. Just a demand. "No," I said simply. "Stephen." My mother's voice cracked. "You're humiliating us. Everyone we know has seen those posts. My friends are calling asking if it's true. Your father's co-workers are asking questions. This is cruel." Cruel? I almost laughed. What's cruel is spending $8,000 on Thomas's Christmas present and giving me used clothing with a note telling me I don't need much. "It wasn't like that," my mother said quickly. "You're taking it out of context." "What context makes that okay? What context turns $47,000 of my money and a $5 thrift store reject into fair treatment?" Thomas finally spoke. "Look, man, I didn't know they were giving you something like that. If I'd known, I would have said something." "Would you?" I asked. "Would you really? Or would you have done what you always do? Accept your advantages and my disadvantages as natural as gravity. You know now. You've known for hours. And you're here asking me to take down the truth, not asking them to apologize." "We do apologize," my father said, though his tone suggested he was apologizing for my reaction, not their actions. "Your mother and I made a mistake. We should have put more thought into your gift. But airing our private family business online is not acceptable." "Private?" I said flatly. "You made it public the moment you handed me that box in front of Thomas and Jennifer. You made it public every time you called me, begging for money but forgot to call on my birthday. You made it public by building your comfortable life on my bank account, while giving me nothing but expectations." "That's not fair," my mother said, tears streaming now. "We've always appreciated you. A used sweater? That's appreciation? 8,000 for Thomas, but 5 for me? We'll make it right, my father said. We'll get you something better. We'll reimburse you for some of what you've given us. Just take down the posts. Some of what I'd given them, not all, just some. Just enough to make me shut up. I don't want your money, I said. And I meant it. Something had broken last night when I found that receipt. Something that couldn't be fixed with belated gifts or partial reimbursement. I want you to leave. I want you to go home and think about what you did. Really think about it. Not about how to make me take down the post, but about what you've done to me for 28 years. Stephen, please, my mother tried, reaching for my arm. I stepped back. Don't touch me. Don't call me. Don't text me. I need space. I need you to actually understand what you've done instead of just being upset that other people know about it. This is ridiculous, my father snapped. You're acting like a child. I'm acting like someone who finally realized they don't have to set themselves on fire to keep you warm. Now leave before I add a third post about how you showed up here, demanding I protect your reputation instead of offering a real apology. They left. My mother crying, my father muttering, Thomas looking back once with something that might have been guilt or might have been annoyance. I closed the door and locked it, then triple locked it. Then I sat on my couch and watched the shares climb past 5,000. By evening, the story had been picked up by 3 local news sites and a national family psychology blog. A social worker wrote an article about financial abuse in families. A therapist made a video response discussing favoritism patterns. My post had become a case study in dysfunction. The family group chat descended into civil war. Aunt Teresa demanded my parents explain themselves. Uncle Alexander posted a laughing emoji. Cousin Sandra wrote a long message about how she'd noticed the favoritism at family gatherings for years but hadn't wanted to say anything. Other cousins chimed in. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd felt invisible at family events. Apparently, everyone had noticed how my parents centered every conversation, every holiday, every celebration around Thomas, while I served as support staff. Grandma Carol, 79 years old, and sharper than everyone else combined, posted one line that made me laugh out loud. I tried to tell you this would catch up with you. Stephen always was the smart one. My mother tried to defend herself. We love both our sons equally. Stephen is being dramatic. Someone, I don't know who, responded by reposting my spreadsheet. $47,300, line by line, transaction by transaction, 6 years of documented financial exploitation. The chat went quiet again. More comments appeared on my original post. People sharing it with comments like, "This is why I don't talk to my family," and "Favoritism destroys relationships," and "He documented everything. That's smart." Several people messaged me privately offering support. Former coworkers, old friends, even a few photographers I admired professionally who'd seen the post through industry networks and wanted to say they'd been in similar situations. One message stood out from my old college roommate, Frank. "I remember you sending money home constantly while eating ramen for dinner. I remember you missing trips because you couldn't afford them after helping your family. I always wondered when you'd realize they were using you. I'm glad you finally did." I hadn't realized anyone had noticed. I'd been so careful to hide it, to pretend everything was fine, to play the role of dependable son without complaint. But people had seen. They'd just been too polite to say anything. On the 3rd day after Christmas, my mother posted a public apology on Facebook. It was clearly written by committee, carefully worded to admit minimal fault while maximizing victim positioning. "We deeply regret that our gift choices this Christmas hurt Stephen. We love both our sons and never intended to show favoritism. We're a private family, and we're working through this privately. We ask that everyone respect our privacy during this difficult time." The comments on her apology were brutal. People calling it insincere, people pointing out she hadn't apologized for the 6 years of financial exploitation, only the Christmas gift. People noting she'd asked for privacy after publicly humiliating me for decades. One comment from a stranger summed it up perfectly. "You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry everyone knows you did it." My father didn't post anything. He never did. He preferred to handle shame with silence and expect everyone to move on without acknowledgement. Thomas posted something vague about family being complicated and everyone making mistakes. He didn't tag me. He didn't mention the camera or Paris. He didn't offer to return anything or equalize the gifts. He just wanted credit for acknowledging there was a problem without actually doing anything to fix it. The post I'd been waiting for came from Jennifer. She broke up with Thomas publicly, posting their text conversation where she'd told him he needed to recognize his privilege, and he'd responded by calling her dramatic. "I can't be with someone who watches his brother get treated like this and does nothing," she wrote. "I can't be with someone who benefits from cruelty and calls it love." That somehow hurt my parents more than anything I'd posted. They'd loved Jennifer. They'd been planning an engagement. Losing her meant losing their vision of Thomas's perfect future. By the end of that week, my post had 47,000 shares. It had been featured on several popular websites. People were calling me brave, inspiring, a hero for setting boundaries. I didn't feel heroic. I felt tired. But I also felt free. For the first time in 28 years, I wasn't carrying their weight. I wasn't the invisible son. I wasn't the family ATM. I was just Stephen. And that was enough. 6 weeks after Christmas, my mother texted me, "Can we talk?" I didn't respond immediately. I'd blocked them from calling but left texts open for emergencies. This didn't qualify. 3 days later, she tried again. "Please, I want to understand." I met her at a neutral coffee shop downtown. Public space, limited time, clear boundaries. She looked older than I remembered, tired. The weight of public judgment had carved new lines around her eyes. We sat across from each other with coffee cups between us like a negotiated border. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I'm really sorry. Not because everyone knows, because I hurt you." It was the most honest thing she'd said in years. "Why?" I asked. "Why did you do it? Why did you always choose him over me?" She was quiet for a long time. "I don't know. He was easier, maybe. More expressive. He needed us in ways you never seemed to need us. You were always so capable, so independent. We took that for granted." "I needed you too," I said. "I just stopped asking because you never answered." She nodded, tears running down her face. "I know that now. I see it now. I've been reading articles about favoritism since your post went viral. I've been talking to a therapist. She says we failed you in fundamental ways." "You did," I said simply, because there was no point in softening it. "You made me feel worthless for 28 years. You used me financially while dismissing me emotionally. You gave me a used sweater and a note that summarized how little you valued me." "I know." Her voice cracked. "I know, and I can't undo it. I can't go back and be better parents. I can only tell you I'm sorry and ask if there's any way forward." I thought about that for a long moment. Forward, not backward. Not erasing or fixing or pretending it didn't happen. Just forward. "Maybe," I said carefully, "but it's going to be different. No more money, no more emergency fund, no more being the backup plan while Thomas gets to be the star. If we rebuild, it's equal or it's nothing." She nodded. "Fair, more than fair." "And I'm not deleting the posts," I added. "They're part of my story now. They're how I found my voice." "I understand." We talked for another hour, not fixing anything, just starting to understand the shape of what had been broken and what might eventually be repairable. I didn't forgive her, not yet. Maybe not ever completely. But I saw someone trying, finally, to see me. My father never apologized. He stopped trying to contact me after the 3rd week, apparently deciding that silence was easier than accountability. Thomas sent one message. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." I didn't respond. Sorry without action is just noise. But Jennifer reached out. We met for coffee, and she told me she'd always noticed how they treated me. She'd broken up with Thomas not just because of Christmas, but because of years of watching him accept privileges he never questioned. "You deserved better," she said. "You still deserve better." We became friends, real friends, the kind built on honesty instead of obligation. My photography career shifted after that. The viral post led to unexpected attention. People hired me specifically because they'd seen my story, because they valued someone who understood what it meant to be overlooked. I booked my first gallery show in March, a series called Invisible Labor, documenting people in service roles, support positions, the workers who keep everything running while rarely receiving recognition. It was reviewed in regional art magazines. One critic called it a powerful meditation on visibility and value. I thought about my parents reading that review, finally seeing my work through someone else's validation. Then I let that thought go. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their attention, or their pride, or their retroactive appreciation. I needed what I'd built for myself, a life where my worth wasn't measured by their scales, a career built on my talent instead of their scraps, relationships founded on mutual respect instead of familial obligation. That used sweater still sits in my closet. I kept it as a reminder, not of their cruelty, but of the moment I finally chose myself. The moment I stopped being invisible. The moment I picked up my camera and showed the world exactly what it looked like when love became transactional and family became hierarchy. I posted one final update 6 months after Christmas. I'm doing well, building a life I'm proud of, surrounded by people who value me. To everyone who shared their own stories in the comments, you're not alone. You're not dramatic. You're not wrong for wanting to be seen. Keep building. Keep creating. Keep choosing yourself. That post got 89,000 shares, but the number didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the message. What mattered was every person who read it and thought, maybe I don't have to accept crumbs either. Maybe I can walk away too. Maybe I'm enough all by myself. The family I'd been born into taught me I was invisible unless I was useful. The family I chose, the community I built, the life I created, taught me something different. I was visible because I existed. Valuable because I decided I was. Worthy because worth wasn't something they could grant or withhold. It was something I'd carried all along. I just had to stop letting them convince me otherwise. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.